Hello and welcome to my channel In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne and this is my weekly reading vlog. When I filmed my first clip earlier this week, I totally forgot to film an introduction. So this is your introduction to my weekly vlog. I will be back after we have gone through the tour of the rest of the week, bringing you through, I don't even remember what days I filmed. Monday, Wednesday, whatever. Anyways, all of my various thoughts from earlier this week. And then I will be back at the end, me and my cute little mug that I picked up for $1 at the thrift store today with the rest of my thoughts on what I have been reading. So I'll be back in a second. Half an hour or so. So it is Monday evening. And I am multitasking here because my house is quiet, but my ravenous children and husband will be home. I don't know exactly when, but I want to get these potatoes cooked so that they can eat when they get home. I already have some meat like that was leftovers from another meal that came out of the freezer and just have to warm that up. I'm making some potatoes. So anyway, just welcoming you into my Monday night busy life here. I am filming this because the house is quiet and because today on my lunch break, I finished Pamela. Now, I don't know if you're paying attention or if you remember last week in my weekly reading vlog, I closed it out by asking which book I should read next in addition to Pamela, but in the end I decided to focus on finishing up Pamela so I could just be finished with it. So I have a clean slate now, and I probably will pick up 84 Charing Cross Road for sure, and probably Only the Beautiful as well. And I'm just going off on tangents here that have nothing to do with anything, but I was listening to Bethany Brings Books on my way home, and she was talking about her nonfiction goals for this year, and I have a loose goal to read at least 12 nonfiction a month, but I was thinking as I was listening to her, I was like, you know, I have this entire shelf, there've got to be 30 to 40 books on it of Christian nonfiction. Some of them I've had for years. So I was thinking to myself, girl, those books are not going to read themselves. And it's not just going to happen by accident. Like, unless you make a plan, you're not going to pick them up and read them. And I want to at least start all of them and see if I'm not liking them or whatever. I have enough of them. I just need to get through them. So if I don't like them, I'm going to DNF them and move on. But it's entirely possible that there will be some real gems in there. So I won't know until I try. So I think what my goal that I made for myself, I don't like doing numerical goals necessarily, other than abroad. I want to read 100 books in a year. I don't make a numerical goal of, you know, like classics or nonfiction, whatever. And that's why I say my nonfiction goal is loosely 12, because I don't really want to bind myself to that and feel like a failure if I don't get to it. None of that matters. What matters is the plan I came up with is this. I want to always have one of those Christian nonfiction books in progress. Now, I have other nonfiction books that I also want to read that have been on my shelf for a while, so I will be getting to them as well in addition. But specifically that shelf of Christian nonfiction, I need to read one always. So I'm going to pick up one and get it started. I usually try to have like a classic or a literary fiction or a heavier book or nonfiction, usually, in progress, plus a lighter read. But sometimes I do have three, so a classic or a heavier work, and then a nonfiction, and then a lighter one. So that's my thought right now as far as what I'm going to be doing. But I'm filming this because Pamela. I finished Pamela. And actually the truth is, I am not going to say a great deal about Pamela right now because I have so many swirling thoughts in my brain. I need to get them organized, and then I'm going to do a separate video that's all about Pamela. I don't know if anybody really cares, but I got to organize my thoughts and like kind of process verbally through it, if that makes sense. So, hang on. I'm going to rinse the potatoes. Pamela. So what I will say is, overall, I don't know how to rate that stupid book because It's not like I hated it. I thoroughly enjoyed the entire experience of reading it, 100%. There's no question. Thoroughly enjoyed, because it made me think, because I had so many questions about it, because I was so intrigued by it, because I was so horrified by it. It was an interesting, engaging process of reading it. And from that aspect, I'd give it 5 stars. And from the standpoint of the fact that there actually were some things about it that I really appreciated as well. Like, there were some positive things, but I mean, I know not everybody who is reading it currently or has read it in the past would agree with me on that, but I found some things that were positive about it. And there were some interesting, like quotable quotes, and there were some very insightful aspects to the story and to the things some of the characters said and some of the things that happened. So it wasn't a complete and total loss. And yet, when I was filling out my review in my reading journal, it has this place at the bottom where you can rate the characters, you can rate the plot, and you can rate the writing. And I gave it 1 star in each of those categories because the characters are horrible. Not only, like, they're just overdrawn and exaggerated. Pamela is a good girl, but she's so good, and she also has to tell you about it, either through her own voice or the people around her. Now, I think that was just clumsy on Samuel Richardson's part. He just wanted to emphasize that she's a very good girl. She's very virtuous. And he wanted to get that point across. Kind of like similar to the Positively Penelope book, actually, that I was reading last week. A modern book in a totally different vein. But same thing. The author was constantly in Penelope's own voice, defending her personality and her character and her intelligence. And then that makes you think, but okay, but are you really then? Like, it makes you doubt them because they have to insist on it so much. Then you doubt it. But I based on everything else, all the other clues in the book, we're not supposed to doubt Pamela's word about it, but it is a little nauseating. And then the hero of the story, or the anti-hero, he was a mess. And then there weren't really any, Mrs. Jervis was the most likable character in the whole story, and she was the housekeeper in one of the houses that Mr. B owned, the hero of the story. And even she was a bit of a mixed bag. She and Mrs. Jukes, who was the other housekeeper, they were actually quite complex characters. All of the other characters were very, very one-dimensional, very flat, but they were actually pretty complex. So there's that. And as for the writing, like, it was very repetitive. The dialogue was very gushing and overly eloquent. I'm sure people didn't even talk like that back then, like in the way that he is having them dialogue with one another. Just completely not realistic at all. Just gushing and verbose and too much and very repetitive, which honestly is probably how I would write if I were to write a book, but I'm not writing a book. So as for the plot, oh my goodness, the plot is horrible. The plot is truly horrible. I know what Richardson was trying to do with it, and what he was trying to do makes sense. And when I see it in a certain light, I can appreciate it, but it's still pretty horrible. I think he could have taken a different turn in the story at about, well, it might be exaggeration to say at 10 different places, but maybe there are 3 to 5 specific places in this story where he could have taken it a different turn, and it would have been a much better plot that more faithfully illustrated the point he was trying to make. And that is the other thing, that in this story, the point Richardson is trying to make, and all of it boils down to this, the point he's trying to make is bigger than the actual story. It's one of those books where it's not about the story, it's about what he's trying to tell you in the story. And it doesn't matter if the plot is good or the characters are realistic or well drawn or whatever. What matters is the point he's trying to make. So, and that's not really my favorite kind of story, to be honest. So yeah, I feel like it was very flawed in many ways, but at the same time, it made me think, and it challenged me, and mentally and intellectually, and I really enjoyed the process. So I settled on 2.5 stars. Honestly, there are times when I think I could give it 3. I don't know. I have moments when I feel like it could be worth 4. It's just a very multifaceted reading experience there. So that was Pamela. who knows what I actually pick up and put in my hands to read next. Right now, I gotta go put the potatoes in the Ninja Rudy. So I will see you all later this week, hopefully. Bye. It is Tuesday evening, and I am once again home alone very briefly before the children and husband come home from basketball practice, piano lessons, and I need to start dinner pretty soon here, but I wanted to take the time to film this quick video because I finished a book. I finished 84 Charing Cross Road by, I'm going to say it the way I say that name in my head, Helene Hanff, which I think is probably like a German way to say it, but that's the way it sounds best to me. So that's how I'm gonna say it. It might not be the right way. Helene Hanff. Anyway, so this book is epistolary, so it fits with my epistolary January reading challenge, the correspondence prompt. And also it fits with the lost mail prompt because I believe that the people involved in this story have all passed away, and the author, including the author, and it also fits with the airmail prompt because, well, part of it, one of the persons writing the letters, Helena, she lives in New York, and the other one lives in England. Also, just want to mention, I have this delicious cappuccino that's decaf. I was running errands after work, and I stopped at Home Goods, and you know, sometimes they have the funnest stuff. And they had a can of decaf espresso from Italy, and I'm pretty sure that that's what Trader Joe's used to carry, but under their own like private label. But they stopped carrying it, and I was so sad because it was some of the best pre-ground coffee I ever had, particularly for decaf, because it's hard to find good decaf coffee. And it's hard to find good already ground coffee, but like never happens. So anyway, I was very sad when Trader Joe's stopped carrying it a few years back. And so I saw it at Home Goods, and I was like, I bet it's the same thing. So I brought it home, and of course I had to make something right away, and I made myself a little cappuccino. All right, anyway. Oh, also I wanted to show you my earrings that I'm wearing today. Okay, 84 Charing Cross Road. It was not exactly what I expected. I mean, it is. I knew what it was. It was a woman who lived in the United States, and she wrote letters to a bookshop in London requesting specific books. And then, you know, they corresponded back and forth about the books. So I knew that, and that's exactly what it is, so that is accurate. But the tone of it, etc., was not quite what I was expecting, because in my mind, I was thinking, you know, an American person who is purchasing books by mail from London, you know, particular books or editions or something, like they must be sort of posh kind of person, like a wealthy sort of type. That's what I was imagining in my head, like a wealthy, middle-aged, upper class woman who had time and money on her hands to correspond with a bookstore in England and get particular books from there. That's not at all what it is. Helene Hanff in this story is actually she's an adult, but she's not a middle-aged adult. I got the sense that in this story, it's when it started out, she was just embarking really on her career, or had started her career. So maybe in her 30s at the most at the start of the story. I don't know exactly how old she was, but she definitely wasn't at the beginning of the story, like, you know, some middle-aged, posh, married, settled woman sort of thing. She was a young artist type. She was a screenwriter and author of other printed materials. And she lived in New York City. At the beginning of the story, she lived in a brownstone, and she rented a room in the brownstone, and she wasn't wealthy at all. She just had a deep interest in books that were not readily available in the United States. So that was the other thing. It wasn't necessarily fiction that she's talking about in this story. It was a lot of essays and poetry and books, like ancient literature sort of things that she was interested in, and not necessarily literature, novels and that sort of thing. So those were the books that she was looking for, and it just happened to be her interest. She much preferred to read nonfiction things, eyewitness accounts, memoirs, that sort of stuff, rather than stories, made up stories. So I disagree with her on that. I definitely enjoy fiction much more than nonfiction, but it was still interesting. I had not read a lot of the authors and the types of books that she was referencing. But all of that is made up for by the fact that even though she dislikes fiction, she reads Pride and Prejudice for the first time during the course of the events in this story, and she loves it. And then later on, she recommends it to a friend, and that friend also loves it, and they become big Jane Austen fans. So all is forgiven. That makes up for everything. She reads a couple other novels in this story that she ends up liking, but by and large, she's pretty critical of fiction, and she really prefers nonfiction. So there's that. But her tone is very like witty and sarcastic, and which is funny because it surprised me that the proper British people really appreciated it as much as they did. And sometimes it's really hard to convey tone, you know, when you're writing and you don't have a voice. But sometimes, like, I would probably have been offended at some of the things that she was saying. But it was all, like, they took it in the tone that it was meant, you know, very, just very humorous. She was just being very humorous and funny. And so they took it in stride. And the most interesting thing for me is that I'm talking about this book longer than it took me to read it. So the interesting thing to me is that it spans 20 years. It starts in like 1948, 1949, and it goes to 1968, 1969, somewhere around there. And it spans those 20 years. And there's so much going on that is mentioned in these letters in passing. For example, I did not realize how far into the 50s the rationing from World War II lasted in England. It was crazy. And she, Helena, was living in the States and didn't have any of these rationing issues because, you know, in the States, we were pretty much, what's the word? Isolated. That's not the word I'm looking for, but I can't think of the word I am looking for. Like, we were kept away from the worst of the ravages of World War II. Of course, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, but other than that, there was not a lot of immediate danger, everything happened overseas, right? So we weren't embroiled in the middle of it like England was. England was constantly being attacked by Germany. So England suffered the effects long after the United States did. So Helena, when she realized that she found about this place in Denmark that would ship packages into England of stuff like meat and eggs and that sort of thing. And so for Christmas and Easter and that sort of stuff, she would send them packages and they were so appreciative. And that was really sweet. And then also she was able to get access to stuff like nylons and send them to them, etc. So that was really neat. And then as they move into the 60s and they're changing life in the 60s, they mentioned the Beatles and the fans of the Beatles, you know, in England, whatever. It's just really interesting to see the passage of time and the development of things and the moving of history in those 40s, 50s, and 60s as they passed by. It's just a very interesting, really enjoyed that little bit of time capsule and really fascinating book. Definitely enjoyed it. I probably would end up giving it 4 stars because it was very good. And I don't have complaints. It's probably not something that I would pick up to read again. And yeah, there wasn't anything, like I don't have complaints about it per se. It wasn't quite what I was expecting, but it was fun. I really enjoyed it. It was a great, interesting little peek into the lives of these particular people, but also what life was like in the United States and England at that time, and their bonding over books. And yeah, it was a fun read. I really enjoyed it. So what's up next? Really good question. Definitely I need to read Only the Beautiful because that is for Chantel's Read Your Shelf Challenge, and I need to get that done. So 100% that is going to be on the plate next. And I also may pick up Shamela as well. Since I finished Pamela, I kind of want to read the response to it by Tom Fielding. So we'll see. Maybe I'll pick that up or not, but definitely Only the Beautiful is going to be up next. So I will see you next time. Bye.
Hello. It is Thursday evening and I finished another book. So I keep saying I finished a book this week, but that is because, well, aside from Pamela, which I finally finished after reading it for, I don't know, it was 7 to 10 days I was reading it. I have read very short books since then, so they didn't take me long to read. This one is really a novella or even a short story, probably more like a short story, and that is Shamela. Now, it's in a bind-up together with Joseph Andrews. I'm not really up for reading Joseph Andrews. I think I've had enough of this era and this type of story, so we're going to be moving on. But I did want to read Shamela after reading Pamela, and my library had it, so I was like, why not? Let's try. Oh, goodness. Unbelievably, this book has higher ratings on Goodreads and Storygraph than Pamela. And that just makes me sorry for the world, because it makes me reflect. Now, as much as Pamela is a one-dimensional character, and because of the way the story is told, she, in her own voice, is constantly extolling her own virtue. It's not because she's arrogant. It was just because it's very clear from the way the story is being told that she doesn't have any big flaws like that, which is unbelievable to start with, right? But she is a good person. She is meant to be a good person. And people much prefer Shamela as a character to her, which makes me understand verses in the Bible that say stuff like, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Like, people just don't know what to love. At my school, we talk a lot about rightly ordered love and about loving what is good, loving what is true, loving what is beautiful. Friends, fellow countrymen, fellow citizens of the world, there is nothing good in Shamela. There is nothing good. There is nothing... Okay, there may be some true things because it's satire. So it's poking fun. And so there's truth in there. There's some truth. But there's nothing beautiful. There's nothing good and there's nothing beautiful in this story. It is only worth your time if you are interested in it as a foil to Pamela. And if you are interested in seeing a perspective of someone else on Pamela. Also, something that rubbed me really the wrong way is that Henry Fielding, in writing Shamela, although a lot of people take it at the surface value and see him as mocking the character of Pamela, and that's why they like it, because they think he's mocking the character of Pamela, who was so good in the original novel, and that irritates people because she was so good, because our hearts are deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. And so we cannot admire anything that is truly good, apparently. So, and I'm lumping myself in with other people because, you know, when someone is very, very good, there's a part of you that's like, I hate you because you're so good, right? I mean, that's human nature. I gotta be honest. Anyway, where was I going? Totally lost my train of thought. Okay, so people think that Henry Fielding is mocking the goodness of Pamela just for that, and creating the entirely opposite character. A manipulative, completely immoral woman without a conscience who is not afraid. In fact, she is willing. She is more than willing. She is desirous of using anyone and everyone around her to gain her advantage. And she doesn't care what happens in the process, except for as it serves her. If it's going to hurt her, in the end, she doesn't want to do it. But if it's going to benefit her in some way, she will do it. And she has literally zero concern for anybody else. So that's the kind of character we're dealing with. And on the surface, it seems like Henry Fielding is just... I'm sorry. I got interrupted. My son wanted to know if his cookies were ready to come out of the oven or not. I'm not exactly sure where I was. But I think what I was going to say was that Henry Fielding, more than anything else, was entering into a debate with Samuel Richardson, which he did directly and indirectly, is my understanding, in many other ways and through many of his other books. And not just with Samuel Richardson, but with everyone who was on board with Methodist theology of the time. He was entering into a debate with them because he was Anglican, and he did not agree with the newfangled theology of the Methodists and the evangelicals, who were becoming more and more popular. And so he very often entered into debate with them in one fashion or another. And he is doing that in this book. And if you read it closely, you can see that. And in this edition, they had a lot of notes in the back that pointed out kind of instances when that was happening. The notes aren't necessarily focusing on that so much, but it does give you enough that you can see that if you're reading an annotated version. So it's a satire and it's a terrible story, and the woman is a terrible woman. But really, at the bottom line, it's an argument about theology and the difference between the Anglican view. And honestly, it all boils down to works versus faith. And that was one of the key sticking points. And grace, the role of grace that it plays in salvation and in the Christian life. So that was his primary purpose in writing this. And it seems to me. And I find it fairly hypocritical, but to be honest, so many authors, their lives don't live up to the works that they wrote, even if they wrote really great things. And even if they wrote things that, with a really strong biblical worldview or whatever, their lives just don't match up to it. But in particular, Henry Fielding, since he made so much of his career about arguing these theological ideas, I find it somewhat hypocritical because, especially as it comes to the way he so frequently attacked Pamela specifically, because the man kidnapped a girl in his early adult life because he wanted to marry her. I mean, I haven't heard much about the story. I've just seen that it was mentioned. So I don't know much about the situation. But hello, that's like one of the main plot points of Pamela. And he's criticizing it. But he did it. And then later on in his life, after Pamela was written, and after he had already written several answers to Pamela via short stories and novels and whatever, he married his maid. So I don't care what he has to say on the subject. He has nothing to say to me that I'm going to take seriously. And also, I'm getting a little bit salty about this, clearly. But the other thing is, I saw quite a few reviews about this book, Shamela, where they were like, yeah, you go, girl boss. You're the girl boss. Okay, I'm sorry. But if that's what you aspire to as a woman, that you literally would use and abuse everyone around you, then you can't turn around and tell me how horrible of a person Mr. B is. Because that's literally what he was doing in the story. Now, I don't know. I can't. I don't understand people sometimes. I really don't. They don't make sense to me. But anyways, that was my reading. And now I'm currently reading, and I don't have it near me at the moment, but I'm currently reading Only the Beautiful by Susan Meissner. And it starts out with a bang, and it's very intriguing. I want to read more. Not quite at the 100-page mark yet, but I am getting into the story, and I want to keep reading it, but we'll see how much I have time for. And I will post another recording if I get to it. And I will see you next time. Bye. Hi, Editing Ann here, because I totally forgot to mention something about Shamela that occurred to me after I made the previous clip. And then I forgot to mention it when I made my final clip, which you will see here in a minute. Anyway, regarding Shamela, in that version of the story of Pamela, Henry Fielding decides to make more of the relationship that Pamela had with the local pastor, Mr. Williams. In Pamela, Mr. B accuses Pamela of having an affair with Mr. Williams, or at the very least of pursuing him instead of him, Mr. B. And so he's very jealous of Mr. Williams. In Shamela, Henry Fielding is making that a reality so that Mr. B's suspicions were correct, that not only was Pamela interested in Mr. Williams, but that she actively pursued him and also had a relationship with him. Had a child by him, in fact. Nothing is mentioned of the child. It's another reason why I think it's horrible that people actually like the character in this book. She had a kid. Nothing is mentioned of what happens to the kid, where it goes. Whereas in the actual book, Pamela is desirous to take care of Mr. B's daughter out of wedlock because she doesn't want her to be motherless, and she feels bad that her mother's all the way in Jamaica. And anyway, if you hated Pamela, maybe you should read Shamela, because then you might like Pamela better, because I kind of did after. She had a little better light on Pamela. Anyway, that's not my point. My point is that in Shamela, she has an adulterous relationship with Mr. Williams. Like, before she and Mr. B ever get together, she's with Mr. Williams. But then even after they are married, she continues the relationship. And so it's definitely adulterous and an illicit affair. So I think that Henry Fielding was trying to say something, given that his grounds for disagreement with Pamela were largely theological. I think he was making a point with the fact that Pamela was having an affair with a pastor. And he made a point of mentioning that Pamela / Shamela was reading books that were written by known Methodists, like George Whitefield, for example. I think was it called The Whole Duty of Man or something? That's one of the books. There are other books mentioned that she reads in the story, or it's mentioned at least there are books that she has. And then it's not stated that Mr. Williams is a Methodist pastor, but the things that he says are twistings of Methodist theology and Methodist doctrine. So Henry Fielding is purposely misrepresenting Methodist teaching and exaggerating it to make his point in this story. But I think he's trying to make a point similar to, like, in the Old Testament, how God said many times that the Israelites were harlots or adulterous because they pursued other gods and other faiths besides him, and they were not faithful to him. And so I think that is all tied up with this whole Shamela story and her having this relationship with the pastor, who is a horrible person, by the way, and definitely not much of a pastor of any denomination. So there's that. Anyway, that was a thought I had after I made my previous clip, and I just wanted to share it in case anybody cared. Okay, back to the final clip of me on Saturday. Okay, we are back to Saturday, Anne, at the end of the week, closing out this weekly vlog. And today was a lovely day. Well, first of all, let me back up to last night. Just a little bit of life update here. The boys had a basketball game. Both of them had a basketball game, and I was able to attend. They were home games, and they both won. The middle school team won, and the varsity team won. And so I was very happy about that. We were all happy about that. And we celebrated at Costco. I mean, their pizza, like, it's pretty good and it's pretty cheap. And also they have, I don't know what it is, ice cream, frozen yogurt, milkshake thingies. I didn't have one, but the boys had one. So anyway, yeah, I know, we're super, we go all out here. That's what we do. We go all out. But anyways, it was fun. Basketball is fun. I'm happy when the season's done, but I do enjoy it. And I enjoy seeing their games, and I enjoy how much they love it. So that was yesterday. Today was a busy day. We had a parent meeting for school, which I attended both as a teacher and as a parent. And then the boys, meanwhile, had a Bible study they attended, and then we took them, dropped them off at their cousin's church for a midwinter retreat. So then my husband and I got to go on a little date, and we went to a place in downtown where, like downtown, our little town. Because around here, when people say downtown, they mean DC, but I don't mean DC. I mean our little downtown. And we had brunch at a place where I have always wanted to go there to eat, but they're always busy. They don't have much seating area. It's kind of a small place in a little historic building in the downtown area. We were actually able to get in
and have a little seat there and eat our brunch there. So that was really nice. Enjoyed that very much. And now I am at home and we are relaxing until we have to go pick up the boys for the evening. Tomorrow, we are expecting more snow. And Monday is a holiday, of course. And then we are all speculating that we will be off probably on Tuesday and Wednesday. Tuesday due to leftover snow cleanup, in part because the weather is going to get so cold. It is going to be very difficult to scrape all of that ice and snow off the roads. So also on Tuesday and Wednesday and possibly Thursday, the temperatures they are forecasting are such that the diesel buses in our counties where we live and work will not start. So historically, at such temperatures, those counties have either closed school or have had 2-hour delays. So given that I only had 3 days of work scheduled next week anyway, because Monday's a holiday and Friday's a teacher work day due to the end of the quarter. That's what I'm trying to think of. Anyways, end of the quarter. Who knows if I will actually go into work at all next week. You know, the teacher's life is rough, but somebody's got to do it. Let's finish up by talking about what I'm reading. I haven't completed anything, but I am halfway through Only the Beautiful by Susan Meissner, and I'm really enjoying it. I have not always enjoyed Susan Meissner's handling of certain issues in her stories, but so far I'm really appreciating this one. And I cannot fault her for her writing style or her characters or anything like that. Really enjoying this. So far, what I want to say is I really love the complexity of her characters. In particular, because this story revolves around eugenics and it revolves around the character of a young teenage girl who has a particular condition, I believe it's called synesthesia, where I don't consider a condition. Really, I don't know that anybody considers it a condition, but more like it's a bit of a neurodivergency, I guess, in that when she hears a sound, she also sees accompanying colors and shapes, which is something that I was familiar with in that I knew it was a thing. I actually honestly also thought it was kind of cool and just a unique trait that someone could have, kind of like blue eyes or red hair, like not very extremely common, but something that just happens on occasion in the gene pool. According to Susan Meissner, at least, and I don't know historically how accurate this is, but apparently it was considered more of a mental illness back in the time this book was written. And back in the 30s, really since it was a growing movement fueled by Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, it revolved around this idea that you could perfect the human race by culling the undesirables by simple means of sterilizing them. And so here we have a young girl in this story who is considered by some to be maybe not insane, but mentally infirm, I guess, or mentally incapacitated, however you want to put it, because she has this ability to hear as well as see sounds. And so there were clinics back in that time where people would go supposedly for mental health help. And one of the things that they would do was they would sterilize them. And in this book, they're presenting it as such that these people were sterilized unawares. Nobody informed them, they just did it to them, which is so reprehensible and awful and evil. It's difficult to imagine. It's difficult to wrap your brain around it. But back to my point about the characterization. What I love what Susan Meissner is doing here is that she is not completely demonizing these people. And let me explain why I really appreciate that. Because I think it makes a great point. These people are not evil villains in this story. That's not how they are portrayed. I mean, what they are doing is 100% portrayed as evil, don't get me wrong. But they are complex people. They have moments of kindness. They have moments of insight. You can see that their motives in every area of their life are not mean or malicious or unkind. They are not thoroughly evil people. They're just normal people. Normal everyday people that you could meet on the street, that you could interact with, that you could work on a professional level with, that you could be friends with. And I think that's really important because I think it highlights the idea that none of us is exempt from following through on an ideology in a reprehensible way, that each of us could be guilty of that. And I think it happens today on a regular basis, actually. Not necessarily in eugenics, although to a certain extent, I think that still exists, but in other areas of, that we lump under social issues or political issues, but really are just human issues that we all should take consideration of and think whether or not the ideology is actually causing harm, and whether when we join in with that ideology, if we are joining in with something that later generations are going to look back and say, how could you do something so evil? And I think that's really important to remember, that none of us, we look upon ourselves as perfectly normal people who aren't prone to evil things and could never, right? We could never do that. And yet, I think all of us could. We could. So it really gives you a lot of food for thought, things to ponder. And I just really appreciate that she took this social, cultural, political, human issue, and she brought it down to a normal human level where it's something that all of us have to be aware of and looking for in our own life, and the things that we believe and the things that we act on, and the way it makes us interact with other people. And I think that it's really important. And I appreciate how she crafted this story in that way. At one point in the story, just recently, the main character, she goes to a group home. And the woman who runs the group home, when she first meets our main character, Rosie, when she meets our main character, Rosie, this is what she says to her. And this passage was just so wonderful, probably more meaningful if you had a little bit of the context from the previous 18 chapters, but still I think that you can get the sense of where this woman is coming from and her attitude. And I feel like it's such a beautiful representation of someone who is able to lovingly help someone wherever they are in life. Anyway, this is what she said when she was introduced to Rosie. She said, "I ran a tight ship with my boys," her grown sons, "and I run a tight ship here at this group home," she tells me as we meet in her living room. "But it's a ship where everyone aboard can feel safe. I don't care about any mistakes you might have made or that were made against you, and I don't count those mistakes as defining who you are. I know life can be unfair. I know things can happen to you that you don't deserve. I also know there might be decisions you made in the past that you'd like to undo and you can't. But here in this house, we look to tomorrow and not to yesterday. Does that sound like something you can agree to?" And I really loved that. That was so beautiful. And I feel like it signals at the halfway point in the book, a turning point in our main character's story. I don't think everything is, sunflower and roses from this point out, but I think it's going to be getting a little more hopeful. Up to this point, it's been a little bit dark and heavy, but I am enjoying it and looking forward to finishing this up. So that is what I have been reading and doing this week. I also just wanted to comment on what is coming up this week on the channel, because I have a couple of fun things for you to look forward to. First of all, I have been talking a lot in this video about Pamela. I filmed a very lengthy Deep Thoughts video about that book, and I'm in the process of editing it. So I think that will go live on Friday, this coming Friday. And then on Wednesday, pretty sure it's Wednesday and not Thursday. On Wednesday, Charlene at Coffee and a Book and I, who are hosting the Jane Austen 250th birthday celebration, we are both simultaneously going to be posting some videos and answering each other's questions. So I created a list of questions that I asked her as a brand new Jane Austen fan or Jane Austen reader. And then she wrote some questions for me as a longtime Jane Austen fan. And so we each are going to be answering our different questions along those lines. I'm posting our videos on the same day, so be sure you watch both of those. I am really looking forward to seeing Charlene's answers to my questions as we continue our Jane Austen birthday celebration. Let me know in the comments if you read either Pamela or The Lost Memoirs of Jane Austen and what your thoughts are about them. We've had some great discussions about those books in my Discord server, so join that as well if you are interested in continuing the chat. And get ready for Sense and Sensibility in February. We will be hosting a group watch or a watch party of the Emma Thompson Sense and Sensibility adaptation later in the month, and we'll have more details about that coming up. So anyway, excited about what is coming up in the next couple of weeks, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.